Hi, I'm Robyn O'Brien, and I'm the founder of Allergy Kids and the author of The Unhealthy Truth, How Our Food's Making Us Sick and What We Can Do About It, which has just been published by Random House. I am also the mother of 4 children between the ages of 4 and 9, and my background is finance. I was an analyst on $20 billion in assets prior to motherhood. And as I came into my story, which I share in The Unhealthy Truth, it was a stunning revelation to learn that we have allowed chemicals into the U.S. food supply that have been banned, removed, or labeled by governments around the world because of the concerns with related health care conditions like cancers, diabetes, obesity, autism, ADHD, and asthma. And so as I learned this, I thought, how can I do a better job of feeding my children the way children around the world are fed in other developed countries? And why aren't we placing the same value on the lives of the American children that governments around the world have placed on the lives of those kids? And so I thought, there's a lot that I can do here to help protect the health of my little ones. And as I learned about this, I thought, it's not just the little kids, it's the big kids too. It's the moms and the dads and my parents and my grandparents. And how can I help inspire this change by informing them of simple steps that they can take to help protect their health? And so I sat down with my kiddos, and my oldest was my reader in the beginning of this story a few years ago. And so we would look at the sides of these boxes, and I would say, Lex, can you pronounce this? And half the time she couldn't. And so when we would hit a word that neither of us could pronounce, we decided we probably shouldn't be eating it. And we started to think, are these things that Mommy's grandmother would have served? Would Mommy's grandmother have had a jar of this on her kitchen counter? And so we also took that approach. And it was pretty easy. We just weaned ourselves pretty quickly off of those processed foods. We got back to real food, and as I share in The Unhealthy Truth, I was used to throwing things into the cart at Costco and grabbing the prepackaged stuff because it was easy and it was quick and it was affordable. And then I stopped and I thought, how many ear infections have my boys had, and how many antibiotics have I had to go to the drugstore for, and how many steroid creams for eczema have I been smearing on them, and what are the costs of all of those things? The opportunity cost of driving to the pediatrician's office all the time and driving to the drugstore, and the financial costs associated with all these healthcare conditions. And so I thought, maybe it's not as convenient and as cost effective as I thought it was. And I did a bit of analysis on that too. I decided to pull our pediatric bills from 2000, when our first child was born, through 2009, and it was amazing to see the decline in healthcare costs as we really weaned our family off of the chemicals in food. And so as I taught my children about those connections, I taught them that they could make an informed choice just like I could. Big kids and little kids can do this. And how if we learned together that we could make these changes together, and then it wasn't a battle, it wasn't me enforcing some will on them that they didn't want. And I taught them, I said, okay, you can choose to have that at school, in the school lunch. But if you feel bad later, you're probably going to act out. If your tummy hurts and your head hurts, you're probably going to be in a bad mood. I would be too. And usually when you're in a bad mood, you get into trouble with your brother. So if you want to make that choice, you can make that choice, but you're choosing all of these consequences. And so we went through that a bit, and just as you potty train a kid and wean them from a sippy cup, it's not a perfect process, and it wasn't a perfect process. But we started at the beginning of the school year, and by the end of the school year, we were doing a pretty good job. And my oldest kid had decided that she felt so much better not having the chemicals in her diet at lunchtime, and she didn't get into as much trouble. And so she decided that she just didn't want hot lunch anymore because she recognized how it made her feel and the consequences that came with that. And so she actually, as I share in The Unhealthy Truth, stood up one day and made an announcement that she wasn't going to have hot lunch anymore before her classroom. So the teacher had to do a bit of damage control for the kids that do always have hot lunch. But I was proud of her because I thought, she's learned this herself. She knows, she's lived it, she's breathed every minute of this herself. And that's when I realized these kids have remarkable brains in their heads, and that we can teach them amazing things. And the earlier we teach them, the better, because then it just becomes part of who they are. And sure, there are going to be people that are going to want to roll their eyes or say maybe these kids are going to be social outcasts. But as I share in the book, Kraft and Coca-Cola and Walmart, they don't include these ingredients, some of these chemicals, in the products they develop overseas. And so the Lunchable lines overseas don't have these same chemicals. And so until we can get those products on our shelves here in the U.S., we really can do a lot to help teach our children well.